To the Cyberspace podcast by Empirical Training. We are here to share our cybersecurity knowledge. We are being four now friends, former colleagues who met early on in our cybersecurity careers, having taken unorthodox journeys into cybersecurity. If you don't know about those, go check out episode 1 to 4. We go in a lot of detail about how each of us got to where we are today and the opportunities that came our way and how we took them. But what we're really aiming to do is share this information so more people can get into cybersecurity. So if you're looking for your first role, cybersecurity, it's a fantastic industry to be in. We love it. And we think more people need to be involved and will love it too. Equally, if you see us on our TikToks or Instagram or whatnot, you'll see us sharing tips of how to stay safe online so that you can make sure that you don't fall victim to common scams or compromises. Even if you have no interest in working in cybersecurity, there's still a lot of information there that you can use in your day-to-day life. And so thanks very much to the boys for working on that and sharing that on a daily basis, because it really is important. We're all part of this cybersecurity front line of defense, and the more we let attackers win, the better they get, to be quite honest, as they reinvest that money into their operations and become more and more sophisticated. So today we are joined with the usual suspects. We've got Robbie, my top left, a former SOC specialist, or SOC lead rather, current cybersecurity consultant.
Hello there. Share the love. Follow us on socials. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything.
Nice one. And Andrew Jones, or AJ, or some of you know him in the Discord, the man who wanted to drive buses.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That's actually caught on a little bit, and I'm getting bus emojis. But yeah, feel free to do it. Join the Discord and do that if you want to drop those bus emojis. But yeah, all right, boys, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. And yeah, I kind of laid off you last podcast on the bus stuff, so I might come back at you again with some more bus comments. And Vaughan, who is our automation specialist involved in AI and really helping us build our labs for our cybersecurity course as well. So thanks very much for joining us, Vaughan.
Hello, people. How are we?
And forgive me for making it sound like you were a guest there. Vaughan is very much part of
it. Are we gonna introduce ourselves on every single podcast?
Well, people might not know who we are, right? They might be listening for the first time, so I think it's important that at least they put a name to a voice.
Yeah, treat everyone like it's the first, isn't it?
Yeah,
but all I'm looking for is hello.
Yeah,
that's all we get. And anything else you want to add, but yeah, no need to lay out our CVs every time. So 2024, we're about halfway into January now. Any resolutions? Any successes? Any failures?
I said I wasn't going to get any sugar, but I've eaten loads of sugar. I haven't eaten.
You've caved already.
Yeah, no, I said I wasn't going to eat any sugar from fruit. I haven't eaten any fruit, but I've eaten a load of biscuits, so it didn't really work.
Why are you stopping eating fruit?
Well, it was just all sugar, I said, but then...
You're going keto?
Yeah, I was going to, but I didn't see the point. I can't be bothered.
You can have a little bit of sugar, mate. It's not going to hurt you. It's just how much you have.
Yeah, I was going through Twitter too much, and I let that crap get in your head. I actually don't. There's no point. I don't actually care that much. Like, I've never been one for diets or anything, so... Yeah, don't go on Twitter, kids.
Nice old chocolate mix.
No sugar.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, a whole box of Maltesers.
Oh, they're good. They're the lighter way to enjoy chocolate. And if Maltesers want to sponsor this podcast or anybody else, let us know. But those who don't know Andy or can't see him, he is in shape. He is testosterone filled. It might not be doing his hairline any favors, but he's got a hell of a rig on him.
That's what I'm gonna have.
Hell of a rig on him.
So I don't know why he's going keto. If anyone needs to go keto, it's me. But yeah. I mean, I don't really do resolutions. I've never really been bothered with that type of thing because I hate rules like Stoptober or Dry January. Yeah, I'll have a month off booze, but not in January when everyone else is. So something about I don't like rules. You can't contain me.
Speaking of Dry January, I'm actually doing a no spend January, other than like your typical grocery shopping, which is quite interesting. We're having me and the wife / girlfriend, we're having a year of saving, so it's good practice for us for our big holidays.
So no silly spending on like clothes or
no clothes, no Greggs, which is a pastry shop in the UK if you're from the US, no McDonald's, no top-up shops, no cheeky Subway, nothing.
Cheeky?
Yeah, it's cheeky. To be
Nando's.
fair.
Yeah, so
cheeky
your regular
Nando's.
grocery shopping, and that's it.
Oh,
Is there
God.
an aim, a goal? What are you moving towards? Saving for?
Well, we want to start getting on the housing ladder in terms of rentals eventually. AJ, I know you're on it already, but it's just a bit of a challenge, just see how it goes. And we spent a lot on unnecessary crap last year. I think my budgeting app does a bit of a roundup of the year, and somehow I spent £2,000 on Amazon.
On Amazon, you gave it to Jeffy B. Like
£2,000 on Amazon. So I'm like, I got to stop that this year. And I didn't even know what I bought.
That's rogue.
So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try and do a bit of saving this year.
That's interesting though, because Amazon could be anything. You could be renting the Barbie movie every week. You could be buying groceries.
Apparently, that's a good film. I haven't seen it, but it's supposed to be good.
I went to watch Oppenheimer.
I watched it on the plane actually. Over it is quite a good film. It is a good film. Actually, the Ken kind of steals the show a little bit, which is a bit of a shame for we think folks beyond Barbie. But it's a great film, and it's kind of interesting. I used to play a lot of rugby, and it was interesting. The fellas like, oh, I don't get it. Normally, they're the men who are a bit problematic. But yeah, good watch, and that's my resolution. Is kind of not be less problematic, but always that's my resolution. But to go do more exercise, kind of get up. I've finished rugby now. Too many knocks on the head, and so I need to find something else to do regularly. I bought a bike the end of last year, and I haven't really been using it, so I'm going to be kind of getting out there. And if I learn to swim, maybe do a triathlon or two. So hold me accountable this time next year. See what if I did any.
that sounds like a lot of rules, Josh.
Yeah, I just like to pretend that I don't like rules.
Yeah, I'm really got any resolutions. I've got goals that I want to achieve. I want to read more, but I don't want to say I'm going to read 20 books this year. It's just I know I need to read more in the evenings before I go to bed, because that's the perfect time for me. And I want to do the 3 Peaks challenge as well. So I'm trying to get some of my mates from home in a little group, and we get that done, I think, in like May sometime. So for people that don't know what that is, it's basically there's 3 big, semi-big mountains in the UK, and you've got to climb up and down all 3 in a 24-hour period. That's the challenge, and people do it for charity. Might do it for charity. Actually, we probably should do it for charity. We'll raise some money for charity. But yeah, it's hard, man. Like, gonna have to train for it. It's a bit of a beast. But we're gonna go, and like with the company, and you have like a guide. There's a first aider just so we don't get lost, and then they drive you to each place, and you have a little kip on the way.
Do you know how far apart they are, distant wise?
There's 2 in Scotland, isn't there? And then it's Snowdon is the last one.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, I think the hardest thing is driving.
Yeah.
Get into each of them.
Yeah, and if we would pay in a company to do it, so you just kip on the way and then get some rest and then bosh it out. I'm looking forward to that, to be fair.
Nice.
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe a bit of races as well, like actual some 10Ks or some half marathons this year, because I haven't done them in ages. I've just started a little running club and I'm loving it. So yeah, nice. Fitness, reading, and the pod as well, like doing this, keep growing empirical training. Lots of big moves, big goals this year for the boys.
Absolutely, amen to that. It all starts so positively. Let's keep building upon where we're at, because this has been a fantastic journey so far, and it kind of brings us to why we're here today. You know, we are 4 former colleagues and friends who want to share our cybersecurity knowledge, and we want to do it in an enjoyable way for everybody. But also we want to get into the kind of the substance of what we're here to talk about today, and that's really around cloud security. We take a lot of our inspiration for what we create and respond to from our Discord members. And what gave me the idea for this one was people just generally doing some cloud security certs and asking some of the basic questions of, what is a public cloud versus a private cloud, and asking about all the various different acronyms. And I'm going to own up to something here that's going to make me look very stupid. But when I first was interviewing for Tech Jewels, I went to Dell, who are a hardware manufacturer, and they were selling stuff into the cloud. So I was going to be an account manager and selling stuff to cloud providers. And at this point, I think I hadn't really grasped what cloud was, because they asked me if they had any questions for them. And I said, as a hardware provider, why do you want to sell into cloud? Isn't that counterproductive to your business model? So I think I generally thought that the cloud was some sort of ephemeral cloud, or like,
it does sound like
electromagnetic field of data.
Yeah.
Does it not live in the cloud?
Apparently not. Apparently, you still got to buy hardware and install hardware somewhere for people to be able to use the cloud. So I mean, that was a young Josh. That's what happens when you study ancient history for a year, then try and get in tech roles. Eh?
Oh, the first podcast. There's no stupid questions, but there's a lot of stupid answers.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't understand cloud, you're essentially using someone else's computer. That's probably the easy breakdown of it.
Yeah, basically that. And I think the thing with cloud is, if you know about computing, you know about networking, you will know about cloud. You just need to learn the new names they've given everything and the slightly different concepts. But all it's doing, as Vaughan said, is shifting it from your personal laptop. So if you use cloud gaming, right, you don't have to have a cloud gaming rig. You can log into someone else's who's got ray tracing and use all that stuff. If you're a company, you don't have to have a big basement full of whirring, servers and fans and all that. You can let somebody else do that, and you just pay for what you need, what you use. Which actually is to use the proper term, capex versus opex. Anyone remember which one's which?
I actually don't know. I don't think I've heard of either.
Here you are. This is my business terms coming in. So capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. Basically, that's the main benefit of it. You can either spend capital, so you buy a server, you have it for 10 years, you spend X number of thousands on that server, and it sits there, and eventually it breaks, it degrades, the CPU degrades over time, or you have to go and fix it. So you're making a big investment up front, you get 10 years of use of it, and then it's probably no longer fit for purpose. So big bill at the beginning, get to use it for free, essentially, electricity and internet bills aside. OPEX then is paying for your operations. So if I want to run 1,000 queries, I'll pay for the compute power to run 1,000 queries. If I want to host a website, I'll just pay to host that website, and I'll only pay for it when people actually try and access it and log in. It can go to sleep essentially when nobody is accessing it. So the model is really attractive for if people have got if people have kind of variable uses of technology, they can't anticipate exactly what they're going to use in the future, then operational expenditure is great. It's pay for what you use. Pay as you go SIM card versus pay monthly SIM card basically is a comparison I didn't even realize existed, but actually makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, so that's the boring stuff. We're going to do a bit of the kind of understanding of what cloud is before we get into the actual security of it. Does anyone want to take a stab at public versus private cloud? Because this is what one of our Discord members was asking about. It's a bit confusing. I answered it, so I can definitely give a crack here if you want me to do that first. Yeah,
you might have to. I don't think I've got a good answer for that, to be honest.
Yeah. No. So this is my cybersecurity journey is taking me a little bit more on the business side of things. These guys are all focused on actually what people deploy in the cloud and how they secure and protect them. But the public versus private is basically AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud are all public clouds. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry can go and use it. So if you go on Amazon AWS.com right now, you can go and spin up a server. You can do that and just pay them. And you're sharing that infrastructure with anybody else who wants to use it. It is logically segmented, but you may well find that you're running a program on the same piece of tin, the same metal that Deloitte might be, or a big company might also do. It's shared infrastructure, and you share the same network switches as well. So it's all kind of, yes, logically separated. In theory, it should never cross, but it's physically on the same stuff. So some people have a concern with that being physically on the same stuff. They want it to be fully separated, but they still don't want to have it all in their own basements. That's where the private clouds come in, where you pay somebody more money and you say, I want you to host this. I want to kind of pay for what I use, but I want to pay premium so that you don't share it with anybody else. So they think that's a bit more secure. Basically, I mean, in theory, we're yet to really see any big examples of people escaping their cloud instance into another person's cloud environment, public cloud. But financial organizations, people with government contracts, they might be more inclined to go to a private cloud where you are renting, but you're renting exclusively. So I think of an example. You've got a rental car, you only pay up and you pay for how much you use it throughout the year, but nobody else can use that rental car for that year. Versus I'm on holiday in Australia. I went and got a big SUV. I've given it back. I'm sure somebody else is driving through it now. When I logged on, I could see all the different Bluetooth devices that have connected, and I could see how many people had been on there. Also, a slight security exposure there, but let's not get into that one. Cool. So I think I've done the businessy boring stuff. I know we're going to have more answers for these next piece. So shared security responsibility model. How does security differ from the traditional data center versus a cloud environment?
Well, I think it's what it's coined as, especially AWS. They say that they take care of the infrastructure of the cloud, and then it's your responsibility to take care of security and the infrastructure inside the cloud. Is that right?
Yeah, in and on is the key words there. So you might think, hey, if I'm outsourcing my cloud compute to somebody else, that I no longer have to worry about the security. They're also offloading that. Absolutely not. The danger is really whatever you're running in the cloud will let you run whatever you want to run, but you could also run something that's really exposed, really vulnerable. Especially if you're running a website, right? That's exposed to any Tom, Dick, or Harry who wants to log into your websites. Anyone can essentially try and exploit that website because it's accessible over the internet. So what they show is a shared security responsibility model. If anyone's at their desk now, I'd encourage you to type it in. There are loads of them out there. But in the basics, anyone know what the cloud will always cover? Because it varies in different scenarios, but what's the one they're always gonna protect? If AJ, I'll give you a clue. Remember when you used to protect ATM machines?
What?
It's like the physical security, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so that makes sense. Yeah, they'll always take care of the physical security of the data centers and things like that. It makes me sound like I was standing in front of ATM machines and watching
Actual security role.
Physical security guard.
Yeah, AJ is so passionate about security. He was freelancing as in front of ATM machines, making sure no one dropped one of those little card readers in there.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, no one used the machine because they were too scared of him. But no compromises either.
There's just a random guy just stood next to the ATM machine 24 hours a day. They're like, well, I'm not going to use that. That's suspicious as fuck.
Yeah. So that's it. It's the physical security, right? They actually, it's kind of cool. If you Google AWS or Azure data centers, I don't think they're not the actual ones come up, but you get these kind of images of big underground bunkers in undisclosed locations. So they literally have concrete bollards all around it, so no one can ram a lorry through. They have key cards on the doors, because ultimately there's all the effort that we go to securing something. If somebody can walk up to it and plug themselves into it, you drop a USB pen. Think of Stuxnet, the really old compromise of a nuclear power plant in 2005 in Iran. That's a security concern. So clouds will always cover that one for you. Vaughan, do you? I know you use you're a cloud expert. Really, you provision lots of our Azure resources.
High praise.
What have you experienced as you've been trying to deploy stuff in the cloud? What are the kind of security considerations you're making when you actually run stuff?
I mean, it depends what you're looking to do, really. If you're setting up a full cloud environment with users, you're going to want to be setting up management groups, specific roles, PIM, which is privilege identity management. I'm talking about Azure specific, which is essentially an I am sort of approach, an identity and access management. So you can kind of give, obviously going off of zero trust and privilege at least, principal least privilege. You're trying to give people the minimum amount of requirements that they need for their daily roles. And all they need with PIM, you can kind of grant authority to yourself to take up some of these roles. So maybe a standard user, if you need to go and edit a subscription, for example, using PIM, you can give yourself administrator access for 12 hours, then it automatically takes itself away. So if you're setting up these big cloud environments, they're the sort of things that you would need to take into consideration if you're an actual organization looking to segregate responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And how does that differ from the other security stuff that we've kind of come across? What do we have to implement from the data center versus cloud when it comes to security?
I mean, we've kind of already touched on the physical security, which is probably the biggest approach if you're working with a data center, barbed wire fencing and locks and biometric and security guards and all that sort of stuff. With cloud, there's a lot of considerations around the sort of resources that are available to the public as well. Something that we're going to touch on a bit later is like exposed S3 buckets and stuff. There's a lot more checkboxes, I'd say, with cloud, and it's very easily to leave yourself open for attack and compromise.
I think it's somewhat a trick question because it's the same stuff, right? It's the same. It's the same kind of security considerations you need to do. You need to patch your vulnerabilities, do those principle of least privilege. That's always a mouthful. And the identity controls. You have to do that on premise as well. But what you touched on there is that you are just more exposed in the cloud because it has to be accessible from anywhere for you in order to access it, because it's not hidden in the walls of your data center. If you're in an office and the data center is down below, you're on an internal network that has access to it, but nobody else outside might have access in. With the cloud, you have to be able to access it over the internet in order to start making changes and provision pieces. So if you're not careful and you make that access broader than it needs to be, then anyone else can also have that access. So it's the same security, but I think your mistakes are just punished a little bit more because they aren't going to be unnoticed. Let's put it that way.
It's very open.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
there are different models of things you can host in the cloud, and so infrastructure as a service. Right, so that's where you just rent in the tin. That's kind of the most basic one. You can then run whatever you want to run on there. So they're treating you like adults. They are letting you run whatever you want to run, but that also means they're letting you make it as unsecure as you want to there.
With the sorry, Rob, go for it.
I was just going to say on the access side of things, you've got to make sure that's nice and tight as well, because you've got all those resources that sit in the cloud and people have got to access them from anywhere in the world. So you've got to make sure that you've got like MFA set up, and ensuring that, I don't know, you've set up some conditional access policies that prohibit certain people from logging in from, I don't know, certain geolocations, or if you've got a specific VPN range, IP range, then people can only log into specific resources if they're connected to the VPN.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the general access stuff that you can cover, that covers for all the cloud pieces. It's just really, really important to limit that exposure, make it closer to maybe what it's like for on-premise. And a lot of organizations are really scared to move into cloud because they're worried about the extra exposure that's going to be out there. For me, that's just a knowledge thing. They don't know enough about how to secure it, because if they can do it on-premise, you can do it in cloud. You just need to have a little bit of knowledge to how to translate your on-premise strategies to your cloud security strategy.
Yeah, that's very much what I've seen with it. That's why where we say you're accessing somebody else's network, it is just another network, whether it's yours or it's not. So if you are transitioning and moving into the cloud, it's just different terminology, and something that we'll get on when we talk about cloud security. But for example, if you're on-prem, you used to use a firewall, now in AWS, you're just using a security group. It still has the same functionality, but it's just different different naming conventions, and it's just getting used to those methods of security and configuration in the cloud infrastructure.
Yeah. And you touched on the different services, Josh. I think you were hinting at infrastructure as a service, platforms as a service, and software as a service. And we also spoke about the patching of those. And the patching of these different services does differ based off of each of them and what the manufacturer will actually provide. So you mentioned infrastructure as a service is you just rent in the tin. So let's say Microsoft, for example, they'll update the storage, the servers, the virtualization software on the server. So they'll be managed by Microsoft, but then you're right, the operating system, the middleware, the applications, that is all looked after by the person renting the server. So it's on them to be updating the operating system, the applications to evade any compromise. And then moving on to platforms of service, this one similar to the last one. However, the manufacturer will actually keep the operating system updated for you as well, along with the middleware. So if you're running Linux Debian or Windows Server 2012, like Microsoft will keep the operating system up to the most recent patch for you, and that's platforms as a service. And then software as a service, where you're just renting the application. So let's say you log into an application in the cloud, that's where the manufacturer will actually keep that up to date for you as well.
Yeah, I'm saying that's kind of that shared responsibility, shared security responsibility model. Then is more of the pizzas are shaded in by the cloud provider as you move down that chain of the different things you can rent. Infrastructure as a service, IaaS, you have the most freedom to do whatever you want. It's just the physical stuff covered, and then they're going to let you put whatever you want into there. It can be as insecure as you want. You're an adult, you run whatever you want to do in there, but also it means that it's going to be the most flexible for you to achieve your goals. Devs will have more work to do, but they can create anything that they need to create because they have complete control over the assets and what runs on the assets, the software assets, as well as physical stuff. So that's the kind of the almost obvious option. And when we see there's a thing called lift and shift in cloud migrations, where this is where you're probably going to start. You're going to take everything that you have on your premise and you're just going to lift it and shift it onto IaaS in the cloud, because it will run just as it did. You're just basically just moving them from your tin, your metal, into the cloud provider's metal. And of course, touching on the stuff that Robbie highlighted around access is really important. But otherwise, the security doesn't really change. You still got to patch the operating system, the software pieces. You've got to make sure the middleware and stuff is configured correctly to lock it down. The platform stuff, Paz, this one really blew my mind initially trying to get my head around this. This is the hardest one for me, because it's kind of it's SaaS. I think is obvious. So it's software as a service. If you log on to Gmail, probably the best example, or Outlook, right? You don't host an email server. You log into Google or Microsoft's email server, and they run everything for you, and then you send your emails. You use it for your functionality. You don't have to run patches on the stuff on their side. They do that automatically for you. You don't even updating your browser is separate from that as well. That's just how you access it. The actual email stuff is getting managed by them themselves. So SaaS is you interact with SaaS every day, even if you don't realize it. And it's a really common model. I don't know if there's any other good examples. Discord, I guess, would count. Even though you don't use the browser, you're using an actual app that you download. But again, no real worries for you. Of course, you can still send dodgy links on Discord in your email. There's still things you have to be concerned about. It's not, the use of it can still be abused. So platform. Anyone else confused by platform as a service, or is that just me?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well,
yeah, I think it's just a dedicated operating system, as far as I can gather.
Yeah, I think that's and I think there might be some variants in there, but for the most part, it's the operating system. So you don't have to install Windows or Linux or whatever. You just run whatever applications you want to run on there. So the one that kind of made me understand it is Kubernetes. So your containerization. Containerization is where you kind of abstract the operating system away from what the function of what the containers are actually trying to do. They all share one operating system, and they do specific tasks within different containers. So it's like a modular web farm, for example, or modular kind of like framework of making all the applications work together and have dedicated functions. So think of it as like if you break your MacBook, you have to take it to the Apple store and they fix it for you. Or normally they just give you a whole new one. If you buy like a Windows desktop, you break a piece of it, your RAM, you can take that out and you can install a new RAM because that's much more modular. So that's how containers works, and they share that operating system. So now I have less to worry about, but I can still run WordPress on platform as a service, and that can still have loads of vulnerabilities and plugins that I have to take care of. So yeah, security is a concern at each of these levels. And really, it's just how much you're willing to take over and how much you want to push on to the your cloud provider. But even then, you've got 0 days that happen in operating systems, so you're not 100% protected in that model. So hopefully that's clearer, because again, that was one that took me a while to wrap my head around the different terms. First of all, what they are, and second of all, the different security concerns. Tools. Now, Rob, I know you've set up SOCs using certain cloud-focused tools or cloud specialist tools that really live off the Microsoft framework. Could you give us a little insight into what that looks like when you're talking to a customer or a security team about how they might want to set up monitoring and controls for the cloud environments they've got going?
In terms of how you bring them into a SIEM?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of Sentinel, really, being the kind of the evolution of Azure security into. I know it does more than that, but
So more often than not, we'll speak to a customer that they have the majority of their network infrastructure living already in Microsoft Azure. So then the conversation just leads nicely into, we've got Microsoft Sentinel, so we can basically just mirror all of your data, and we can monitor your data in a seamless way. So it just makes sense for a customer if they've got a lot of their infrastructure that sits in the cloud, especially if it sits in Microsoft. Then Microsoft have made a smart move in creating a SIEM that can monitor the customer's network and detect any malicious activity. So it's a no-brainer for somebody that has their data sitting in Microsoft Azure. And then the beauty about Microsoft Sentinel is it has connectors available for multiple log sources. So you're not limited to just cloud data. If you take a service with Microsoft Sentinel, you can link your Windows Active Directory. So you can link your on-premise log data. You can link your physical firewalls or your network switches. All of that data that flows through those network devices, you can plug that into Microsoft Sentinel. And then even if you've got data that lives in AWS, you can push that into Microsoft Sentinel. You can push pretty much everything into Microsoft Sentinel, providing there's a connector for it, or if there isn't a connector for it, then you have a dev team that will build a connector that can send that data and then normalize it and parse it in a way that you can apply detection rules against that log data that can create those alerts that you triage, and then they turn into incidents if they're credible.
Hang on, Josh, I think you're muted.
You've lost your audio, boy. We got some technical difficulties.
Well, that can happen on the best of podcasts.
So does anyone have any experience with AWS or GCP then? AJ, I think you've some AWS experience.
Yeah, so that was actually a question I was going to have. What's everybody's preferred cloud? My most experience is in AWS, but what have you boys actually had most experience with?
Yeah, for me, it's Microsoft Sentinel, just because we had it at our last place. But then, I had experience working AWS alerts, but not actually triaging incidents directly in like guard duty.
Yeah, that's the way that it was from.
Or is it?
Say it again.
is it Inspector as well in AWS?
Yeah, most
Inspect
of
is kind of the vulnerability checking type of one, where your exposures are, and then guard duty is like the alert creating one. There isn't a SIEM equivalent in the same way there is for Azure.
no,
But it
there's
kind of
not,
goes
is
to
there?
we talk about those connectors, right, Robbie? That's what I was going to say when my mic kicked out. I think I kicked the plug actually. Sorry, guys. But the cloud native tools, the AWS ones, Azure ones, GCPs, they automatically work for the security purposes that you need there. So the easiest thing to grab off the shelf. But like I say, you can go to the work to use third-party stuff, or even just use devs to make your own connectors to pull that data. Because ultimately, what you need is it kind of all to talk to each other, unless you're just in that one environment. So, for example, AWS Guard Duty is not going to help you out on premise, and you're going to have to correlate across the Guard Duty alerts with what's happening on your on premise. And hybrid environments is the most common these days. That being people in on premise and maybe multiple different clouds as well.
Yeah, I've not come across too many like Google Cloud logs myself, and it might come as a surprise to people because like, as a security analyst, you're like quote unquote supposed to know everything or like have had exposure to everything. But if you've had external customers and then they don't have any data that lives in GCP, then you're not going to be triaging any potential incidents, are you?
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. The majority of the companies that I've worked with, the AWS has definitely been the number one out there. Azure, I've actually got. I probably haven't seen any Azure logs, to be honest. And like Robbie's saying, you would have thought
Interesting.
during our time we would have seen them, but that's all very new to me. GCP, barely. I've seen a few kind of some of the basic logs that people have been setting up when they're first setting up the GCP cloud, but a big part of my exposure has been AWS, and it seems to be majority of the customers that I work with, that's always where it's been.
Yeah, for me, Azure definitely the most experienced company I'm at now. We're at an Azure only company, so we only work on Microsoft Sentinel. In the past, I've worked with AWS in terms of seeing the logs, triaging the incidents, and at the moment currently as well, we do have a customer a few customers actually that use GCP in their environment, so we're getting some GCP incidents in. So I've kind of seen, Pokemon catch them all almost, but yeah, I've dabbled in them all, but it's definitely Azure that is the one I've seen most.
I think Pokemon catch them all is quite an interesting, because the thing I was just going to raise is these are the same things with different skins. It's almost like different starter Pokemon of different generations, right? You've normally got a strong fire one, a water one, and a grass one. They might be a bit more of a lenience towards one of those types at the beginning, but because GCP, I haven't seen a huge amount of security, but the people I do know who use it, they tend to use it historically focused on the web application side of things. They favor the services that Google's able to offer from the web development side versus say maybe what AWS and Azure have already, but they are constantly evolving and releasing new stuff to kind of compete with each other there. So the logs, people say, AJ, you've done Azure, so people have done Azure and AWS and GCP. Do they differ that much? What's the differences when it comes to securing or analyzing them?
I think they're the same, to be honest. That's what many interviews that I've been in, and they've asked me. Well, first they ask you what do you think of the cloud compared to on-premise, and that's very much the same. And then they ask you what do you think of the various platforms and kind of the log analysis. But at the end of the day, the logs all have very similar across the board, really, not just in the cloud platforms, but they all have very similar kind of artifacts and fields in there. It's usually source IP address, user, action taken, event type, and things like that. So across the board with AWS or any of the cloud platforms, it's usually more understanding about the source or where it came from. So if you're looking at a log that has come from an S3 bucket or has come from an EC2 instance, that will translate similar to what the equivalent is in Azure. I'm not sure what they're called, but in GCP, the logs that I've looked at, again, very similar, but in AWS, even the logs across the various technologies in AWS, the logs are very, very similar. So from what I've seen across the board, there's not much difference when it comes to actually analyzing and responding to to something that happens on them.
Yeah, it very much is a reskin and a rebrand to a degree. Like you're saying, AJ, a lot of the data that goes in is very similar, if not a few nuances. And the only different factor really is the categories that the data is under. They might have a slight different naming scheme. So then it's just about, okay, well, I know Azure uses this name for this type of data. What does that correspond to in GCP? Then you're at the same sort of level then.
Is that a pain for you, Vaughan, when it comes to writing automation or analytic rules for these? When you're like, oh, why can't we all just use the exact same format so I don't have to write a GCP parser and then do different logic? Or is it not actually that big a deal?
I mean, yeah, it can be a bit of a hiccup. Like there's certain schemas you can try and build that kind of try and correlate and bring them all into the same area. But when you are building automations, especially as the automations are typically tailored around specific incidents, you don't really have an Azure incident combined with a GCP incident. So yeah, you're typically creating two different automations.
Will there be one to rule them all, or is it going to be like who's going to win? Charmander, Bulbasaur, Squirtle? I feel like AWS is definitely Charmander.
But I think half the internet is AWS now, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
If AWS goes down,
Charmander vibes.
Oh, don't write Microsoft off though. They are big and they use that weight. And actually, Google as well, I think, is they're making some big moves too. Like they've really invested in security. You know, they acquired Mandiant, who I always thought really favorably of as a great threat intelligence based company. They've released some great stuff, and they've been building security services around Mandiant and around technologies. Also acquiring some SIEM and SOAR technology too. So, I mean, they're all so big that Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they do other things. They clearly, you have to have some weight, and they do have things like Alibaba Cloud. I don't know if you've ever come across those.
I was just funny you say that. I just went to look at the market share of where AWS obviously is still leading, but then like there's ones that I've never heard of. Like you said, actually the one in fourth place is Alibaba Cloud, and you got things such as IBM Cloud. I didn't even know Salesforce had a cloud. I knew about Oracle. Yeah, Salesforce. I didn't. Is that actual like?
I wonder if their SaaS is just so big that they've got their own cloud. You know, because everybody who sells something uses Salesforce.
You asked about the one cloud to rule them all, and I don't think there will be, in all honesty. I think it's definitely going to be a unity between not just the top three but the others as well, Alibaba and IBM. And back to your point, Robbie, you were saying about all the different data connectors. Like companies are going to use different cloud solutions, so it's imperative that these data connectors are being built to allow for this cross data transfer.
Yeah, it'd be way easier for security analysts if everybody just use AWS.
Selfish point.
Yeah,
it would be easier for us.
I'm not
terrible for innovation,
AWS,
right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
If one of them, I mean, that's the whole thing with competition law. You don't want a monopoly, because then the fact that there are so many of them fighting with each other means that they force the other ones to kind of push along and catch up. And also, attackers will only have to write scripts to attack one type of thing. Not that it varies hugely, as we've already discussed, when they're actually attacking assets that are deployed in the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's important to kind of discuss. That a big part of what we do at empirical training is hopefully to give you information to get your first job, or maybe even your next job. So maybe you're a cybersecurity analyst and you're working as an analyst and you're analyzing these events and cloud events and things like that, and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should move into maybe more cloud engineering or cloud infrastructure. But that's something that you can definitely do. Pick one of the platforms. Don't try and master them all. It's better to specialize in one of them and just become an expert at it, and you'll no doubt move into a very high paying role if you're able to do that. And it's up to you which one you pick. Like, you can see from our experience that all of us have experienced mostly with the top three. It seems like AWS and Azure are the ones that are stand out. But have a look at the different job descriptions when you're out there. If there's like a Google Cloud engineer, and there's probably not many out there because it doesn't have such a big market share, but there might be a specific company who really needs a Google Cloud engineer. Start learning it and move towards it. There's definitely a lot of room now with the cloud. It's been around for quite a long time, but there's some really kind of well-paying and really interesting roles out there.
Yeah.
For anyone
go back and sorry, I was just going to say, just don't feel overwhelmed as well. Just going off the back of what AJ was saying, you don't have to feel overwhelmed when we're talking about all of these different cloud-based solutions and like everything that you should be quote unquote expected to know as a cybersecurity analyst. You can niche down and have a specific role and just be an expert in that. You don't have to. We've already discussed that the functions remain very similar across the board for all cloud solutions. So once you learn how AWS works to the core, then you can easily pick up the intricacies that exist within Microsoft and GCP.
And for
So it's
anyone
almost
that
go on,
is
Vaughan.
on the fence, for anyone that is on the fence or is ready to take the leap into one of these areas, Azure and AWS, and I imagine GCP as well, all offer like free credits to actually go in and use their cloud. So as I was building our lab environment, I think I had like 30 days and like a £200 limit to go in and spin up virtual machines and create network security groups and deploy S3 buckets and all that sort of stuff. AWS also do it. I was playing with that a while ago too. So yeah, if anyone is interested, go in, use up these free credits and make the most of it.
Yeah, you can tie it in as well with the other stuff you're researching, right? I know if you're doing Hack the Box, which we or me out and things like that, we advocate you go and try out. You can actually do that from a cloud instance. You spin up your cloud instance and run some software on that instance, and then lo and behold, you're learning how cloud works while also doing you're using a virtual machine that you don't have to provision on your own hardware to actually go and target these things also. So there's a lot of opportunities to combine these skill sets as you're developing them.
Yeah, and that's the way that I see it as well. And definitely leaning into what Vaughan's point is, actually get involved and use the services. So like there's free tiers across the board. The AWS Cloud Practitioner cert, for example, there's a free tier to start you off to understand the basics, and you can actually class that like it's not well known in the industry that if you pass a free cert that you'll get much from it, like in terms of a job, but you will get a lot of knowledge from that. And then what you can do, spin up some free tier EC2 instances in AWS and start messing around with things like Pacu, which is from Rhino Security Labs. It's a AWS exploitation framework, and you can go through there, have a go at attacking these different EC2 instances, and then try and think about the steps of how you would secure them then to prevent these various attacks. And then that kind of leads you towards then sort of the kind of cloud security, cloud engineer style role.
Those free certs are actually a great nod because they aren't super detailed, but I'll be honest, only cloud certs I've done are the free ones, and I didn't think I ever needed anything more than that. I just did the ones that are out there because it just teaches you the terminology. It teaches you like things like I understand about DNS. I know how that works. I had no idea that Route 53. Maybe that's not a good example. I should have worked that one out because it's port 53, isn't it? But that's just the terminology that they use is different, and so it makes you can then when you hear somebody talk about some cloud terminologies, you can just apply the knowledge that you have from general computing and general networking to these new terms, and that for me was what gave me the most confidence to kind of go and say, oh yeah, this isn't all that different. What I thought was they like to abstract it behind their own product names, their own cloud names, and make seem really complicated because ultimately they don't want you to go and do the other clouds. They want you to stay on their cloud. Maybe that's slightly part of the motivation for why they have their own name for everything rather than kind of taking a unified approach. But yeah, go do that. So I think come up to the time now, and we did as always. We planned to cover a lot of content in this, and we go down a few rabbit holes. We start talking about Pokemon, and we share our New Year's resolutions and so on. So we have definitely got a part 2 coming up for this, where we prepped some of the big cloud breaches that we've heard about out there in the news that are really interesting, as well as some of the ones that we've seen ourselves, ranging from the unglamorous to the really glamorous. Last episode, you heard AJ talk about one he'd seen in the real world around a crypto miner.
I had to jump in on that when I made a mistake about how they actually got in. So I wanted to clarify that. I'll clarify it again in the breaches. But if you did listen to the last one, it was that the security group was open to exposed to the internet to all IPs. and there was a database running on that EC2 instance, and that database was exposed to the internet with default credentials. I said that they compromised the role, but they didn't. They managed to log into the database. So anybody that's listening was like, "How did they compromise the role?" That was a mistake. I had to clarify. I've been thinking about it all episode, and I was going to wait till the next one. But that was a great segue there. But yeah.
Glad you could cover it. I mean, I didn't even notice that. I thought you assumed they just used they cracked the credentials or found some stolen ones online. But that is how they just stroll in and take something. Is that those ACLs being allowed open, and kind of points to when I started cybersecurity, I thought everything was going to be super complicated and super. Lines of code, and like you see the main, when people are like smashing keyboards saying I'm in the mainframe, that type of stuff. Actually, now it's just, oh, this is open, right click, enter. But yeah,
that's a bit of a schoolboy error move as well, isn't it, AJ?
Yeah, definitely. And that is, and so that was an alert again that we created after, was security groups being open to the internet. And again, simple alert, but it's just something that wasn't in place for the customer at that time, and it took an incident to kind of resolve that. But yeah, like you say, it's a schoolboy error. You shouldn't be doing things like that. But again, it happens all the time.
Yeah, and the clouds, to be fair to them, or maybe I shouldn't be fair and say that they should have done this in the beginning. They've started to make their defaults a lot more secure, so you can't just open it to everyone from the beginning, or a warning will pop up and say, hey, you're making this available to everybody, because it's a lazy thing that devs often do, is leave things open to the world because they can't work out what's stopping it. But it leaves them a lot more exposed too. I think that's enough for what we want to cover today. Hopefully that was a great introduction to cloud security. For people thinking that cloud security is an intimidating place, it really isn't. It just requires you to kind of transfer your knowledge to different terminologies. To use Vaughn's example, it's different starter Pokemon, maybe Gen 1, Gen 2. They look completely different, but if you go play Totodile, he's exactly the same as a Bulbasaur or Squirtle, to use the water one. So you just got to really just dive into them and actually realize, hey, they're not all that different after all. But I think also you said don't become a master of all of them, right? So Ash Ketchum, got to catch them all, probably not the way to go. Focus on one, really build your experience and knowledge out there, but understand that this is scalable knowledge that you can easily scale. And if you do have an opportunity where a SOC is asking you, hey, we do Azure, and rather than AWS, you specialist AWS, know that you can easily get to be an Azure specialist if you're already an AWS specialist. The path is a lot. There's a lot less resistance when you've been down one of them already. So any other closing thoughts, gents, before we sign off and obviously regather for part 2, where we're going to dive into a lot more detail around the big breaches that we've researched.
The fun part's coming up, don't miss it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Right. Thank you very much. This has been the Cyberspace Podcast. This has been Robbie, AJ, Vaughan, and Josh of Empirical Training. As ever, thanks very much for joining us. Please give us feedback. Wherever you're viewing this, there's normally a way to get back to us. Discord is the best way, though, because we will have a full conversation with you, whether you're critiquing the thumbnail or whether you're telling AJ that his correction is still wrong and you want more detail.
Oh, you're dropping a best emoji.
Share the love, people.
All the best.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, boys.
See you. Bye.